Revealed, bullies target new boy for money. Incredibly, he's a state karate champion at 17. Jacob stepped through the doors of East High School, the sound of laughter ringing like a bell, bright yet distant. As the new kid, the hope blossomed within him like a fragile flower. This could be a fresh start. But hope twisted into trepidation as he caught sight of a gang of boys leaning against the lockers, their eyes flashing with mischief and malice. His quiet demeanor had painted a target on his back, a fresh canvas for their cruelty. "Hey, new kid!" one of them shouted, eliciting laughter from the others. "Got any lunch money you want to share?" Jacob's stomach twisted. He thought of his mom, her sacrifices for him, as she served tables at the diner late into the night. He was determined not to let her down. He was a fighter, after all, a state karate champion. But frustrations mingled with fear, creating a kind of humiliation that was hard to shake off. Could he really stand up to them without crushing the values instilled by his mother? As the jeers grew louder in the hallways, so did the internal battle surging within him. Each shove and insult felt like a bead of molten lead forming a heavy weight in his gut. Resilience? Dignity? They were principles he clung to, but his martial arts training lit a fire within him that begged to be unleashed. He hesitated, wrestling with the question that clawed at his mind. Would fighting back mean he was betraying everything he stood for? Days passed, and with each humiliating encounter, the pressure mounted. Would the dojo master's teachings apply in this chaotic school environment? True strength, the old man had said, lies not in aggression, but in discernment. Jacob turned the phrase over in his mind again and again. What if he didn't strike back? What if he just walked away? With a shaky breath, the thought of ignoring the bullies swirled through his head. Yet there was a flicker of shame each time he imagined them laughing behind his back, growing bolder with each act of submission. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jacob's thoughts edged toward the impending spring championship, a competitive spotlight that could shift everything. Images of facing the bullies echoed in his mind. What if he used the platform to confront them? Every school's spiritless cheer, every wince from the audience as they chanted his name, could redefine him from prey to contender. But then it hit him. Their taunts weren't just directed at him. They had schemes they intended to execute, plans that could hurt others, manipulating power in sinister ways. Every moment of indecision became more suffocating as the stakes rose. What would it mean if he fought? Would he clash with the ideals his mother had instilled in him? Or worse, could his choice ignite a fire that burned through the fabric of the school, deepening the divisions that bled through their community? Jacob stood at a precipice, unsure of which way to leap. His heart raced, thoughts bleating through his mind as the looming championship promised to serve as a stage for the massacre of his principles rather than the victory lap he had envisioned. With the shadows of confrontation darkening his thoughts, Jacob was left wrestling with fear and determination, racing against the clock, with every day drawing closer to the moment that could decide everything. In the charged air, only one question remained. Would he rise to fight against the tide of cruelty, or would he, against everything he believed, choose to walk away? Jacob barely slept that night, the unease swirling like a relentless storm inside him. He lay awake, the words of his dojo master looping in his mind, twisting into an intricate dance with his thoughts. Strength lies not in aggression, but in discernment. It felt like a cruel joke. He was armed with skills that could render his oppressors powerless, yet the very core of those teachings held him back. Morning light spilled through his window, illuminating the dust motes that floated lazily in the air. The day loomed ahead, fraught with uncertainty. All that was left was to figure out a plan. It was almost time for gym class, where the students' competitive spirit constantly drew dark lines between camaraderie and rivalry. As he entered the gym, butterflies fluttered chaotically in his stomach. Every corner of the room held echoes of laughter and camaraderie, yet he felt more isolated than ever. The coach's booming voice cut through the chatter, calling the students to form teams for a basketball game, a distraction from his tumultuous thoughts. Playing basketball sounded futile, but it could offer a temporary escape. As he dribbled the ball toward the hoop, a glimpse of hope grew in him. What if using his physicality in a different context could reveal his strength? But soon, so did the relentless laughter of the bullies, loud as ever, forming a cruel melody against the gym floor. It felt as though every error he made fed directly into their entertainment. He sought refuge from their jeers by focusing on the game, yet the bully's presence loomed heavy, casting shadows on his every move. After the game, while he wiped sweat from his brow, the gang ambled closer, a swagger in their steps, hungry for vulnerability. "Nice play, champion. Show us some of those glorious karate moves next time," one of them sneered, eliciting jeers from the others. The urge to fire back, to retaliate with the strength he trained for, surged within him. But just as quickly, the intellectual underpinning of restraint pulled him back, a fraught tether at the edge of all he believed. Later that evening, Jacob found himself in familiar surroundings, the dojo. The smells of sweat and worn mats embraced him like an old friend. He drifted through the movements, seeking solace in practice, yet his mind was elsewhere, grappling with the burden of both options looming ahead. Was silence the answer, or was it cowardice woven into a fragile web of reasoning? His sensei's presence was grounding. "You return from battle unscathed, young one?" he asked, an eyebrow raised in amusement. Jacob's heart raced. The implications of the question weighed heavily. "Not yet," he admitted, the weight of his struggles spilling out like a flood. The dialogue slowly peeled back the layers, concealing his uncertainty, revealing the rawness beneath. "Every warrior faces their demons, Jacob. Certification of who you are comes not just from your title, but how you choose to engage with the world around you." His sensei's words echoed, intensifying the internal conflict churning within Jacob. In the world where bravado painted strength, was there not another form of courage hidden beneath a quiet exterior? He realized this was more than a dilemma about personal integrity or public image. It was a pivotal moment toward self-definition. Amidst the kung fu clashing of values, the mirror reflected back a boy on the cusp of transformation, who had yet to decide if he would stand tall or continue to crumble under pressure. As the days drew closer to the championship, the weight of preparation felt intertwined with his soul. The pressure was building around him, a raging tide that could either wash him away or push him to shore. The decision hung precariously, waiting for the moment when time would stitch together the past and present into one inevitable confrontation. Jacob stood in front of the dojo mirror, the last reflection he would see before stepping onto the precipice of his newly defined future, timber trembling against choice. As he inhaled deeply, he blended all those conflicting elements within. I see my strength, I recognize my fear, but which path would he pick when they crossed at last? And from the depths of uncertainty, a question bloomed. How would he make his stand when the spotlight turned toward him? The days slipped into a rhythm, each one blending into the next, like muted brushstrokes on a canvas filled with too many worries. Jacob found his thoughts spiraling around a singular point. The championship match was fast approaching, and with it came the increasing weight of his own expectations. Pacing restlessly in his room, he sketched out scenarios in his mind, all leading to one inevitable confrontation. As the morning sun pierced through his window, a fierce determination settled within him. The quiet resolve to face his feelings and his bullies bubbled beneath the surface. On his way to school, he walked with purpose, contemplating each decision that led him here. The familiar taunts of the gang echoed in his mind, and although they lingered like shadows, the sting of their comments transformed into a silent battle cry. Gym class arrived, and with it came the annual dodgeball tournament. It was a rite of passage that pits strength and agility against quick reflexes and tactical thinking. As the class lined up, Jacob took a steady breath. Today, he would embrace the challenge. When the whistle blew, adrenaline surged through him. Dodgeballs flew like missiles, and the air crackled with laughter and shouts as teammates ducked and dodged. Jacob allowed himself to struggle through the initial chaos. He observed, caught glimpses of the bullies rally against the weak, an unsettling reminder of his own vulnerabilities. Yet as the game progressed, something shifted. Positioning himself against the wall, Jacob channeled the poise he learned in the dojo. He focused, executed strategic throws rather than wild attempts. Each catch and launch felt like part of a greater plan. Midway through, he spotted one of the bullies, posturing with a bravado that masked insecurity. The teenager had always been a step ahead because of his size, but today, Jacob felt a flicker of insight. This was an opportunity to redefine himself, to confront his fears without resorting to fists. As Jacob threw and dodged, he recognized a latent skill surfacing. The intensity of the game heightened his senses, and he began to predict movements effortlessly. In one pivotal moment, a well-aimed ball soared straight toward him. In a split second, he avoided it and snatched the ball from the air, an act that elicited cheers from his classmates. Encouraged, he let go, throwing it back with precision, hitting his target cleanly. A cheer erupted from his team, a chorus of admiration. His bullies, however, began to retreat from their bravado, confusion settling in their eyes. Jacob felt emboldened, hollow echoes of doubt replaced by assertiveness. In this electric moment of satisfaction, he became aware there was strength in strategy, in choosing when to engage and when to retreat. As the tournament drew to a close, Jacob walked off the court, drenched in sweat and triumph. The others praised him loudly, while the bullies, humbled, remained at a distance, whispering. Yet Jacob grasped a vital piece of knowledge. He didn't have to be the loudest voice in the room, nor did he need to flaunt his martial arts skills to quell fear. Strength lay not in purely physical prowess, but in how he chose to handle the situation. Leaving the gym, a whisper of fear clung to him. The championship wasn't just about winning, it posed a greater question. Would he let his reflections guide his next steps into potentially dangerous territory, or would he continue learning the balance of strength and discernment? As Jacob gathered his belongings and made his way to the dojo later that evening, a realization gripped him deeply. He wasn't merely cultivating physical strength, he was constructing the framework of his identity. What if, amidst this whirlwind, he could redefine what it meant to be a champion? But the clock was ticking, and the confrontation loomed closer. How would he solidify these lessons when the battle for his own self-definition arrived? The afternoon sky turned a muted grey as Jacob stepped into the dojo, the clatter of his footsteps drowned by the echoes of focused energy reverberating off the polished wooden floor. The familiar scent of sweat and wax hung heavy in the air, a reminder of hard-won victories and relentless effort. Today, he needed to leverage everything he had learned in his training to solidify his newfound understanding of strength. As he entered the main training room, Sensei Tran stood at the far end, demonstrating precise forms to a group of younger students. The rhythmic claps of their feet mirrored the beat of Jacob's racing heart. Watching them, He contemplated how far he had come. The fear that once threatened to consume him would become fuel for his journey if he could maintain that trajectory. "Jacob," Sensei Tran called, noticing him, "join us for the next drill." He nodded, shedding layers of doubt along with his backpack. The next hour felt like an eternity, with repetitions of kicks and punches blending into a symphony of effort. With every movement, he chiseled away at the mental blockade that had plagued him. Today, he wasn't just practicing technique, he was crafting his resilience. A sudden hush fell over the students as the sensei introduced a new drill focused on sparring. "Pair up," he instructed, eyes twinkling with promise. The room buzzed with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Feeling a surge of adrenaline, Jacob eyed his opponents. He could select someone he had previously intimidated, or a more skilled contender who might push him. The memories of the bullies who tormented him danced in his mind. He made a choice, not for ease, but to strengthen himself. Vivian, a determined and agile girl, had consistently challenged him during practice. They'd grown to respect each other's abilities. As they squared off, the atmosphere shifted, charged with the mutual understanding that they were both there to grow. Jacob recalled the dodgeball tournament and how he had control over the battlefield, strategizing instead of merely reacting. Sparring began, and the first few rounds were tentative, a dance of feints and gauging distance. Yet as the bout progressed, Jacob began to apply his observations. He visualized his movements as layers of strategy: anticipate, engage, and reflect. When Vivian landed a quick kick to his side, he felt the fire of determination ignite rather than extinguish. Each jab and counter had him calculating his responses, shifting away from raw emotion towards tactical execution. With every encounter, he discovered an instinctive ability to exploit openings and create opportunities. He had witnessed this same tenacity in the dodgeball tournament when he had learned to navigate chaos. The two of them exchanged blows, not just physically, but in a psychological back and forth. When he tapped into that arena of mental strength, something within him solidified. Yet it wasn't just the sparring that mattered. Jacob realized the true essence lay in what lurked beneath. As they wrapped up, breaths mingling in the humid air, Sensei Tran called them both over. "You both showed great promise today. Remember, it's not just about winning, but about what you learn through the process." Jacob nodded, absorbing the wisdom like a parched plant soaking up rain. He felt a shift inside. The understanding of strength he had long pursued was crystallizing. He was not merely training to fight. He was evolving. However, the pull of his anxieties remained as tangible as the bruises that would soon form from the sparring. He had conquered the dodgeball tournament, but would he be able to face the real battle ahead? As Jacob stepped off the mat and began his cool-down routine, a growing unease gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the thought of the championship match. The timing was drawing ever closer. Would he cultivate the wisdom to transform his training into reality, or would he falter under the pressure of expectations when facing the bullies again? Behind him, a faint whisper of tension simmered. How raw and revealing the battlefield of self-definition could truly become. The confrontation was fast approaching, and this time only he could decide how to wield his newfound understanding. The atmosphere in the dojo felt dense as Jacob unwrapped the towel from around his neck, the moisture clinging to his skin like the worries that clouded his mind. Each repeat of Sensei Tran's earlier words echoed insistently within him. The lessons had seeped into his bones today. Strength was not merely displayed in brawn, but in the resilience of the mind. Yet even as Jacob time, and again returned to this realization, anxiety tightened its grip around his heart when he considered the upcoming championship match. The day after the sparring session dawned, bright yet cold, a stark contrast to the tumult brewing in his chest. Jacob's routine was a meditative one. His feet moved through familiar practices, executing forms that now felt instinctual. He was calm in the action, yet his mind raced with potential scenarios, each darker than the last. What if he failed? What if those bullies returned, reveling in his weaknesses? Would he have the fortitude to stand tall when the spotlight laid bare all of his vulnerabilities? During lunch, Jacob found himself sitting alone at the edge of the cafeteria. His friends were engaged in animated conversations across the room, their laughter punctuating the air. He wanted to join them, to immerse himself in the simplicity of camaraderie, but the spectre of confrontation loomed relentlessly. Like a slow-burning fuse, it flickered beneath the surface, urging him to confront it rather than evade it. His lunch tray clattered when he accidentally knocked it against the table, drawing the attention of the group nearby, the same bullies who had haunted his school life. Their smirking faces were an unwelcome reminder of the past. Time seemed to slow as they approached, Jacob instinctively tensing up. Yet something shifted within him. He noticed it wasn't just fear coursing through his veins. It was determination. "Look who it is," one of them jeered, a familiar mockery in his tone. "State champion in karate, huh? What are you gonna do, kick us?" Jacob's first instinct was to withdraw, a reaction deeply embedded in his psyche. But before he could falter, he took a deep breath, forcing the tension to melt out of his body. What if this moment was a test, not just about physicality but integrity? He had long practiced striking against opponents on the mat. Perhaps this confrontation could serve a similar purpose. "Yeah, I might," he responded, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. A flicker of uncertainty crossed their faces, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. The tension intensified, electrifying the air between them. "But I'm not going to fight you here." They laughed, clearly unprepared for his refusal to engage in their expected games. "What's the champ scared of? You'll just run away like always? It's not about fighting, it's about getting paid, right?" The words stung, but Jacob realized they revealed more about the bullies than he had anticipated. They thrived on fear, banked on taking advantage of others. And while they took pleasure in bullying him, there was power in his response. It lay in not needing to play according to their rules. The conversation shifted, becoming a mental sparring match. Jacob's mind raced as he recalled lessons from Sensei Tran. You can't control what others do, but you can control how you react. It was true. He didn't have to be their victim. He could redefine himself in this moment, shape his narrative. After a few terse exchanges, the bullies gradually lost their nerve. They dispersed with disenchanted mutterings, leaving Jacob standing alone, but no longer a prisoner of his worries. Instead, there was a clarity emerging in him. By confronting the bullies, Jacob realized he asserted control over his fear. He didn't need to succumb to their intimidation. Each interaction had become a facet of his training, mentally preparing him for the real fight that lay ahead. As he returned to the lunch table where his friends sat, laughter sparked like warm flames, kindling a hearth. They welcomed him back with open arms, unaware of the battle he had just undertaken. He felt a jolt of affirmation as he participated in the easy banter, yet he knew the real challenge was still looming. And as the day waxed into evening, anticipation crackled in the air, pulling him toward an inevitable confrontation. The championship awaited, and with it, the ultimate proving ground for everything he had become. He had faced one battle today, but now the stage was set for the most significant test of his resilience. Would he carry this newfound strength into the arena when it mattered most? The weight of expectation pressed upon him like a heavy mantle, urging him to rise, not just for the title, but for his own sense of self. The championship day arrived with an electric pulse in the air, a stark contrast to the anxious thrum within Jacob. As he tied his belt and prepared his uniform, he could feel the weight of his life thus far resting heavily on his shoulders. Each knot pulled tighter, anchoring the resolve that had ignited in him over the past few days. The lessons of changes, resilience, mental fortitude, and control swirled in his mind like the air rushing through the dojo. As he stepped into the gymnasium, a vast arena teeming with spectators and competitors, the usual cheers felt more like an auditory assault. The vibrant colors of the banners hung overhead, yet the cacophony muted under the force of his anticipation. Every face in the crowd was a reminder of the stakes, his friends, his coaches, and even the bullies who had attempted to undermine his confidence. It was a concentrated test of everything he had learned. But now the real question thrummed beneath the surface. How would he face his own internal fears? Warm-up routines commenced, and he moved mechanically through his katas. Each position resonated deeper within. He could feel the purposeful precision of his movements resonate against the backdrop of his heartbeat. But no amount of physical preparation could assuage the stories spiraling in his head. Uncertainty gnawed at him, replaying the small moments of vulnerability and subsequent triumph he had experienced in the cafeteria. With the first match soon approaching, Jacob sought a corner of the gymnasium to ground his thoughts. Visions of victory mingled with churning fears of failure. It was a fragile balance that amplified his internal tensions. What if he couldn't channel his newfound strength? What if, in a moment of doubt, he reverted to the boy who had been scarred by bullying? "Find your focus," he muttered to himself, recalling Sensei Tran's teachings about clarity in moments of chaos. He closed his eyes, letting the noise fade as he settled into a controlled breath. With inhalation, he invited strength, and with exhalation, he let go of doubt. Calm returned, steadying his resolve. He stepped back into the energetic swirl of the gym, where the matches began to unfold around him. A clash of GI against Guy, the sharp echoes of strikes, and the collective gasps of the audience underscored the intensity. It was all part of the script, the collective ripple that solidified his purpose. As his name echoed through the speaker system, urging him to the ring, the panorama of challengers painted a vivid tapestry of potential threats, each representing fears he had yet to face. But this time he was armed not just with technique, but with the clarity born from understanding his own worth, the worth that the bullies had tried to strip away. The referee signaled the start, and the first competitor moved toward Jacob with fierce determination. This opponent was a beast of intensity, and it quickly became evident that keeping up would require more than brute strength. It would call for strategy. As they exchanged blows, Jacob's mind flipped through possible vulnerabilities, searching for gaps in his opponent's offense, learning to adapt mid-fight. Every hit was a calculated response, each movement dripping with the necessity of the moment. He was a dancer in this chaotic ballet, maintaining grace amidst force, executing moves that spoke to his resilience. This opponent, despite their prowess, struggled against Jacob's newfound clarity. Yet as he gained ground and landed a decisive blow, his heart thudded not just from triumph, but from the knowledge. It wasn't merely about winning, it was about proving to himself that he was worth the fight. The crowd's roar, which flooded him with adrenaline, would have drowned out his echoing fears, but instead it amplified the assurance that surged through him. Jacob stepped out of the ring, a rush of energy coursing through his veins, holding on to the belief that each match could mirror his own journey. But deep within, another match was waiting, a confrontation that would challenge everything he had become. The prospect of facing a competitor that mirrored his past loomed like a specter in his mind. What lay ahead would not just test his physical prowess, it would forge a defining chapter in his life. Could he maintain this balance when faced with the darkest parts of himself? The question lingered, heavy and unresolved, challenging him to confront not just an opponent, but the shadows of his own fears in the arena. As Jacob exited the ring, the adrenaline lingered like a spark igniting a fire within. He could hear the crowd's buzzing applause in the distance, yet the noise felt increasingly far away. Their cheers, a distant echo as he wrestled with his thoughts. The satisfaction of the recent victory had barely settled when it came barreling back into his mind. The weight of the next match, the one against his past, loomed larger than life itself. "Jacob!" A voice broke through his reverie. It was Lucas, the boy who had stood beside him during practice, who had believed in him even when Jacob doubted himself. "That was amazing! I knew you could do it!" Jacob was grateful for the momentary distraction, but as Lucas's eyes sparkled with pride, Jacob's own thoughts turned dark. He wished he could accept this victory fully, free of the impending confrontation. "Thanks, but there's more to come," he replied, the apprehension rising like a tide ready to pull him under. The reality of his next opponent pressed heavily on him. Derek, a jock known not just for his strength, but for his rough reputation. More than that, Derek was a mirror of Jacob's past hauntings, an embodiment of every hurtful word and degrading shove Jacob had once endured. The thought of facing him sent a chilling shiver down Jacob's spine. How could he face someone who had once made him feel small and worthless? With a deep breath, Jacob forced himself to summon the lessons he had absorbed. It was now or never. He had to turn this fear into fuel. The notion resonated within as he walked the hallways of the gymnasium, catching glimpses of Derek's confidence and swagger. That confident facade stirred up memories of bullying that once felt insurmountable. As he stood by the waiting area, he watched Derek dismantle his previous opponent with brutal efficiency. A part of him wanted to shrink back, to question everything he had learned in the dojo, the resilience he had just begun to grasp. Sleepless nights filled with doubt felt ready to swallow him whole again. "Hey, watch this," Lucas nudged him, and Jacob met his friend's encouraging gaze. Jacob felt a swirl of determination rise in his chest. "What is it?" Jacob asked, feigning calmness. "Just the way Derek carries himself. He thinks he's untouchable," Lucas said, his voice steady. "But maybe, just maybe, he's not." Jacob turned back to watch the match, intrigued by Lucas's words. What if Derek's confidence was a mask to hide fragile insecurity? What if he had something to learn from this very bully he feared? The seconds crawled as he absorbed the crowd's energy. Jacob considered how perhaps this bout wouldn't just be physical. Inside the ring, there could be a lesson coded in each movement. Suddenly, clarity dawned. This was a chance not just to win, but to confront the mental barriers that had been building inside him since childhood. He visualized his strategy, zoning in on Derek's style. Perhaps it would be about patience, finding openings through observation, capitalizing on overconfidence. Maybe he could expose a weakness rather than be overwhelmed by his past. "Jacob!" His name rang out again, snapping him back to the present as the referee signaled for him to take his position. The crowd's roar swelled as if anticipating something monumental. With a newfound focus, Jacob stepped forward, heart racing yet steadied by the resolve he had developed. This was not merely a match against Derek. It was a duel with his fears, an assertion of self-worth that he had fought so hard to reclaim. As he faced Derek across the mat, the air thickened with tension. The jock's sneer seemed to threaten to eclipse everything Jacob had fought to become. But Jacob stood firm, willing himself not to falter. "Let's see what you've got," he challenged inwardly, as the referee signaled the start of what loomed to be more than just a physical encounter. The moment he had feared was now real, a proving ground that felt significant, not just for a trophy, but as a revelation of who he truly was. With every ounce of newfound clarity, he resolved to show not just Derek, but himself, that he was far more than a victim. Could he outmaneuver the dark echoes of his history, or would this battle compel him deeper into his insecurities? The stakes were elevated, and most dangerously, the outcome would unearth truths he barely began to grasp. As the whistle blew, Jacob propelled himself forward with a surge of adrenaline that cascaded through him, drowning out the rush of the crowd. This was it, the culmination of every training session, every scraped knuckle, and every moment he had spent confronting his doubts. This was about far more than winning. It was about claiming his life back from the clutches of fear. Derek charged with the confidence of someone who had known only dominance. Jacob felt his heart race, but instead of retreating into his shell, he thrust himself into the moment, drawing upon the lessons learned from his mentors. There was a rhythm to combat. He could hear it now, a drumbeat of strikes and blocks echoing in his mind. Key advantages were hidden within Derek's attacking strategy, and he was determined to exploit them. Derek unleashed his first punch, a wild swing that Jacob barely dodged. Instinct kicked in, and instead of spiraling into panic, Jacob calculated his next move. He had prepared for aggression. It was what Derek thrived on. With a swift pivot, Jacob redirected the energy of Derek's attack and countered with a quick jab to his ribcage, feeling a flicker of surprise from the jock. Yes, he could do this. The match evolved, each exchange becoming a dance, a sharp reminder that his body could transcend the mental fears that had always loomed like dark clouds overhead. Every time Derek advanced with an overpowering shove or shove, Jacob responded with calculated movements. He had the advantage of agility. He was smaller but quicker, and he began to weave in and out of Derek's reach, gaining ground against the overwhelming odds. As the minutes passed, Jacob began to gain confidence. The moments of pain from memories of bullying flickered in and out of his thoughts, but rather than immobilizing him, they became a source of anger effortlessly channeled into each block and response. Each successful move fueled his momentum, and the more he fought back, the more he understood who he was becoming. No longer the scared boy in the cafeteria hiding from slurs and jibes. Suddenly, Jacob seized an unexpected opportunity. Seeing the crease in Derek's technique, he worked his way inside the jock's defenses, expertly leveraging his weight against him, just as his sensei had taught him. It was more than just physical skill. It was a confrontation with his history. The thrill surged through him, the liberation that came when turning fear into mastery. As he executed a well-placed leg sweep, the crowd roared, but the sound felt as if it were coming from inside him, echoing the triumph he had long sought after. Derek stumbled, caught off guard for a split second, and in that fleeting moment Jacob's instinct kicked in. He lunged forward, executing a rapid succession of kicks, each one a declaration of defiance against his past. This was a battle between more than two fighters. It was a war between Jacob and the shadows of self-doubt that had haunted him for too long. As he pushed Derek toward the edge of the mat, the room spun with an urgency that felt electric. Would this fight end with victory, or would it plunge him into a deeper confrontation with his vulnerabilities? The countdown loomed as he prepared for his final strike, a culmination of everything he had learned, every ounce of pride he had built. Yet as he raised his foot for the decisive blow, something caught Jacob's eye. The smirk on Derek's face remained, a facade of confidence despite the mounting pressure. It was a subtle reminder that, regardless of the outcome of this match, Derek's own insecurities still lurked beneath the surface. What if this fight held lessons beyond mere victory? In that instant, Jacob grappled with a profound realization. Confrontation wasn't limited to the physical realm. He could emerge victorious, not just over Derek, but in the ongoing battle within himself as well. The referee's voice melded with the fervor of the crowd, urging him forward. Now or never, Jacob told himself, focusing not just on winning, but also on understanding what this experience means for him moving forward. The final crescendo was at hand, and the echoes of his past melded with the shape of his future. As he focused his energy on executing his final move, he wondered if this encounter with Derek would truly set him free, or if he was merely opening a new chapter filled with further challenges he had yet to face. The impact reverberated through Jacob as he brought his foot down, striking Derek with a precision he had been honing. The jock stumbled back, finally losing his grip on the facade of invincibility. In that moment, amidst the chaos of the crowd, Jacob felt a wave of clarity wash over him. He was not merely fighting against the person before him, he was battling the confines that had tethered him to weakness for far too long. A swift glance at the audience revealed a mix of awe and disbelief. Eyes widened, mouths agape. This was not the timid kid they had assumed he was. The cheers surged into his chest, lighting a fire that glowed brighter with each passing second. But amid the adrenaline, a shadow of doubt crept back in. If he were to win, what would that mean for his future? Would he perpetuate a cycle of animosity with Derek? Or could he find a way to transcend that rivalry? The fight continued, each exchange of blows amplifying Jacob's internal dialogue. He began to recognize a shift. Not only was he facing a physical opponent, but he was also grappling with his own ambition. His newfound strength stirred an unsettling thought. Could he break down the barriers of who he had been and who he might truly become? The prospect excited him, yet frightened him deeply. Derek, now visibly rattled, charged again. His movements lacked the grace of earlier, powered more by desperation than technique. Jacob sidestepped effortlessly, recognizing the change in the tides, and countered with renewed vigor. But instead of savagely capitalizing on Derek's decline, a thought settled into his brain. Compassion. Could he find a way to fight without malice, while still defending his ground? He had always been taught to win decisively, to deliver punishment where it was due. But with each successful maneuver against Derek lingering in his mind, he grappled with the need to assert his own identity versus the instinct to retaliate against past wrongs, complicating his approach. How much strength was required to show restraint in the face of hostility? As the match climaxed, Jacob spun around Derek one last time, his instincts urging him to make a decisive blow. But a small voice reminded him that moments of grace define true champions. The moment was agonizing. He could either hammer down on his opponent or deflect encouraging growth. With every ounce of determination, he chose the latter. Sliding under Derek's last, reckless swing, he grounded him with a gentle but firm push instead of a lethal kick. Derek hit the mat, but as Jacob stood over him, having won but not fully obliterated, he felt a mix of satisfaction and uncertainty. The cheers grew louder, but they felt distant. Pushing a knee into the canvas, he leaned down. Without words, he offered a silent nod. It was a small gesture, but one that transformed the competitive energy into an acknowledgement of shared struggles. As Jacob stepped back, exhilaration mingled with the dawning realization that this was only the beginning. Winning a match would not erase years of hurt, but perhaps it could open doors to empathy, an unexpected resolve to understand adversaries rather than vanquish them. The crowd erupted around him as he walked to his corner, but Jacob was lost deep within his thoughts. The challenges he faced were not confined to the ring. They extended into every aspect of his life. How would this new understanding reshape his life moving forward? The final buzzer rang, but silence settled into his mind. He could no longer see his journey as just a means of fighting back. It was also a chance for growth, for both him and Derek. How could he sustain this shift when he returned to the halls of his school? With uncertainty bubbling within him, he realized he would have to confront not just Derek, but also the echoes of self-doubt he had unleashed during the showdown. As he walked off the mat, the narrative of his existence began transforming, guiding him toward more profound encounters that would challenge everything he thought he knew about strength, vulnerability, and the interconnectedness of human experience. In that moment, Jacob understood that every battle he fought on that mat was only the surface of an ever-deepening struggle. What awaited him next was a dialogue of confrontation, one that would draw out hidden layers of loyalty, understanding, and ultimately define who he would become in this new chapter of self-discovery. As he entered the locker room, the weight of that realization pressed heavily upon him. He could feel the pull of a looming encounter that would shape the very fabric of his journey. Who would he face next, and how would it change him this time? The gym buzzed with excitement, a palpable energy hanging in the air as Jacob emerged from his victorious match. The cheers of his peers cascaded over him like a warm wave, but beneath the surface, the anticipation of deeper conflicts still lingered in Jacob's mind. Facing Derek had been a revelation. It had transformed not just how he viewed his opponents, but also how he perceived himself. In the moments after the match, Jacob felt a mix of exhilaration and contemplation. Each cheer reminded him of the adversities he had faced, not only in combat, but in the everyday trudge of navigating high school life. He had proven himself capable, not only as a state karate champion, but as a young man who discovered his true strength lay in restraint, in the ability to choose his battles wisely. Leaving the gym, however, the reality of his journey pressed upon him. Winning a match was the initial step, paving the way for greater confrontations ahead. In the hallways, he spotted Derek, still nursing a bruised ego and reputation. But instead of desiring revenge or further retaliation, he felt an urge to approach the boy who had haunted him for so long. "Hey, Derek!" Jacob called out, heart pounding faster than the seconds that ticked away. Other students paused, eyes flitting between them in anticipation. "What do you want, loser?" Derek shot back, his bravado still intact despite recent defeat. Jacob stepped closer, pushing past the fear that trembled at his core. "I just wanted to say, it doesn't have to be like this." Surprise flickered across Derek's face, a jarring contrast to the hostility they had exchanged before. "What do you mean?" he asked, defiance wavering. "I know you have your crew, and I thought after today, maybe we could change things around here." Jacob steadied his breath, choosing to break the cycle of hostility. "Look, I'm no stranger to what you've been through. I get it. But being tough doesn't have to mean tearing others down." As he spoke, the surrounding students went silent, entranced by the unexpected turn of events. Jacob could feel their puzzled looks weighing heavier than any opponent's blow. But he pressed on, his confidence solidifying as he recognized the power of vulnerability. "I may have won today, but my victory isn't about humiliation. It's about growth. I'd hate to think that people only remember us for the fights we picked." Jacob's voice softened, inviting. "What if we led by example instead?" Derek appeared caught off guard, the sheen of ego beginning to crack. Jacob watched as resentment ebbed and a potential spark of understanding ignited in his eyes. "I don't know what that looks like," Derek said finally, vulnerability peeking through. "Maybe I just—" He hesitated. Then his demeanor shifted. "But I'm tired too, man." "There's strength in choosing to better ourselves together," Jacob affirmed, relief flooding through him as he spoke. "We could pave the way for something different for both of us. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but wouldn't it be worth it?" The silence opened a space for new beginnings, and in that moment Jacob understood the power of his journey. Perhaps strength wasn't confined to physical battles, it burgeoned from the essence of compassion and growth. This moment, a shared understanding of shared humanity, cemented Jacob's transformation far beyond the dojo's walls. As the tension broke and Derek gave a reluctant nod, the students began to murmur excitedly. The tide was shifting. Jacob had turned adversarial energies into an opportunity for alliance. In that simple gesture, he transformed his path. A significant leap from being merely a fighter to becoming a beacon of resilience and growth. Jacob walked away, invigorated by the encounter. The heaviness in his heart lifted as clarity dawned. His true achievement lay not just in championships, but in the power of connection, the possibilities of healing. He had taken control of not just his narrative, but he was inspiring a shift for those around him as well. With every step down the familiar halls, he felt an undeniable strength emanating from within, a solid confidence born of authenticity and genuine engagement with his peers. The conflicts he faced head-on had shaped him, teaching him that transformation wasn't just about overcoming obstacles, but valuing oneself enough to transcend adversarial relationships. As he entered the dojo later that evening, he approached Sensei Tran, who awaited him with a knowing look. "You've learned well, my student," the sensei said. "You have taken your journey beyond the mat and into the heart of community." Jacob smiled, recognizing the truth in those words. He had accomplished what he set out to achieve. He had not only conquered his fears, but had turned his greatest confrontation into a moment of significant personal growth. The weight of past experiences no longer felt crushing. They became part of the tapestry that defined him. The championship had rendered preliminary lessons of resilience and strength, but the real victory stretched into a new realm of empathy, understanding, and self-identity. Jacob had grown, not just as a martial artist, but as someone willing to forge genuine connections. He would continue to fight the good fight, not with fists, but through the strength of character that would resonate far beyond the confines of the dojo. With renewed purpose, Jacob stepped further into his life, with a firm belief that he could shape not only his own destiny, but influence those around him. The journey to self-discovery and true achievement was ongoing, and he was prepared to meet it head-on. Now was the moment for relentless pursuit, as his story had only just begun to unfurl. If you enjoyed this powerful story, you need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional tales. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure more amazing content reaches you. Comment your thoughts about Jacob's journey and your reactions to this transformative ending. We want to know what you think. And please, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. It could inspire someone today. Don't wait even one more second to support your favorite channel.